Behind the laughs and the family-friendly fun, some episodes of The Munsters carried a deeper, darker meaning. One episode in particular sparked controversy, faced syndication bans, and left a lasting impact on viewers who recognized its unexpected message. This episode, Herman's Peace Offensive, was originally intended as a humorous take on violence and conflict resolution, but instead it left audiences questioning whether The Munsters was making a statement about real-world issues or accidentally contradicting itself. And that's not all. Over the years, The Munsters tackled themes that were surprisingly ahead of their time, including acceptance, discrimination, and even the cultural shifts of the 1960s. Some episodes were quietly removed from syndication, certain scenes took on unexpected political meanings, and guest stars like the Standells brought the show into the growing counterculture movement. In many ways, The Munsters wasn't just a comedy, it was a reflection of the social climate of its time. But before we dive into the dark truth behind this classic Munsters episode, I'm on a road to get 1,000 subscribers as a small channel. If you want to help me out, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps, and I appreciate every single one of you. Now let's get into it, because the Munsters may have been a family of friendly monsters, but the real world isn't always so simple. One of the most unexpected and controversial episodes of the Munsters was Herman's Peace Offensive, which aired in 1965. On the surface, the episode seemed like another lighthearted adventure featuring Herman Munster trying to do the right thing. This time, the story revolved around teaching Eddie Munster about nonviolence after he gets into trouble at school for fighting. Herman, in his usual well-meaning but bumbling way, sets out to prove that conflict can always be resolved peacefully. But here's where things take a strange turn. After spending most of the episode preaching about the importance of avoiding violence, Herman ends up in a boxing match with the bully's father. What was supposed to be a lesson in pacifism quickly spiraled into an action-packed, comedic brawl, completely contradicting the episode's original message. Viewers at the time had mixed reactions, and even today, the irony of the episode stands out. Was the Munsters trying to say that sometimes violence is the answer? Or was this just a case of sitcom logic, where laughs took priority over consistency? The episode's unintended contradiction wasn't the only issue it faced. In the 1990s, when the Munsters was enjoying a revival on networks like Nick at Night, Herman's Peace Offensive was quietly removed from syndication. The reason? Network executives believed that, despite its humorous tone, the episode promoted violence rather than condemning it. In a time when television networks were becoming more cautious about content that could be seen as inappropriate for younger audiences, the episode was deemed too controversial. This decision sparked some debate among fans. After all, The Munsters was never meant to be a moral authority. It was a goofy, family-friendly comedy. But looking back, Herman's Peace Offensive does serve as a fascinating example of how television, even unintentionally, can send mixed messages. Was it an innocent case of comedic storytelling gone wrong? Or was it an early example of the show unintentionally touching on deeper social issues? Regardless of the intention, Herman's Peace Offensive remains one of the most debated episodes of The Munsters. It may not have been the show's most famous moment, but it certainly left a lasting impression. At first glance, The Munsters might not seem like a show that tackled serious social issues. After all, it was a comedy about a lovable family of monsters trying to fit into suburban America. But beneath the goofy charm, The Munsters had a surprising message about acceptance and discrimination, one that made it an unexpected symbol of the civil rights movement. One of the most powerful moments in the series comes from Season 1, Episode 19, where Herman Munster gives Eddie a heartfelt speech about the importance of accepting people for who they are, regardless of how they look. In the scene, Herman tells Eddie, "The lesson I want you to learn is that it doesn't matter what you look like, whether you're tall or short, or fat or thin, or ugly or handsome, like your father, or whether you're black or yellow or white, it doesn't matter. What matters is the size of your heart and the strength of your character." For a show airing in the 1960s, when racial tensions in America were at a boiling point, this message was incredibly powerful. It wasn't just a generic, be nice to others moral. It was a direct statement about judging people by their character rather than their appearance, a core belief of the civil rights movement. In recent years, this clip has gone viral, with many viewers pointing out how progressive The Munsters was for its time. Fans have shared it on social media, praising the show for its timeless message about equality and inclusion. While the show never explicitly addressed race, the Munsters themselves served as a metaphor for being treated differently just because they looked unusual, something that many minority communities could relate to. Beyond that famous speech, the Munsters also had subtle ways of reinforcing this theme throughout the series. The family constantly faced rejection and misunderstanding from their human neighbors, despite being kind, loving, and generous. This idea of being judged for being different resonated deeply, making the Munsters a show that carried more meaning than many people realized at the time. Though it was a simple sitcom on the surface, the Munsters had moments of quiet brilliance, reminding audiences that the best people aren't always the ones who look the most normal. While The Munsters remains a beloved classic, not every episode has been treated equally in syndication. Over the years, some episodes have been quietly removed or edited due to changing social standards, controversial themes, or outdated humor. While most fans remember The Munsters as a harmless, family-friendly sitcom, a few episodes contained elements that didn't age well or were deemed too problematic for modern audiences. One of the most notable examples is Herman's Peace Offensive, which we already discussed. The episode's mixed messaging about violence led to its removal from certain rerun blocks in the 1990s. However, it wasn't the only episode to face issues. Other episodes featured themes or portrayals that were later considered inappropriate. For instance, episodes that included outdated stereotypes or jokes at the expense of certain groups were quietly left out of syndication rotations. Another controversial case was A Visit from Johann, an episode where Herman meets his doppelganger, a failed Frankenstein-like experiment named Johann. While the episode itself was a lighthearted take on the evil twin trope, some critics later pointed out that Johann's portrayal leaned into outdated depictions of mental illness, with the character being treated as a dangerous and uncontrollable monster. Because of this, the episode has been less frequently aired in modern reruns. Additionally, the Munsters occasionally had episodes that played into Cold War-era fears, depicting foreign villains or spies in a way that, while humorous at the time, has aged poorly. Shows from the 1960s often leaned into patriotic storylines that reflected America's tensions with the Soviet Union, and The Munsters was no exception. Some of these episodes, while not outright banned, have been quietly rotated out of rerun schedules. Despite these removals, most Munsters episodes remain widely available through streaming and DVD collections. However, these cases serve as a reminder of how television evolves over time. What was once considered acceptable family entertainment may not always align with modern values, leading networks to make careful decisions about what gets re-aired. For fans of the Munsters, these hidden controversies offer an interesting look into how a seemingly innocent show sometimes crossed unexpected boundaries. While it was never intended to be provocative, some episodes unintentionally reflected the social and cultural tensions of their time. One of the most fascinating and unexpected moments in the Munsters came in the episode Far Out Munsters, when the family found themselves caught up in the growing rock and roll movement of the 1960s. In this episode, Herman and Lily rent out their home to a famous rock band, the Standells, who turned the Munster mansion into the ultimate party house. For those unfamiliar, the Standells were a real-life rock band best known for their hit song Dirty Water. They were part of the rising garage rock scene, and their appearance on the Munsters was one of the earliest examples of a sitcom featuring an actual rock band in a storyline. While this crossover seemed like just a fun, comedic moment, it actually reflected a much larger cultural shift happening in America at the time, the growing divide between traditional family values and the rebellious youth counterculture. The episode perfectly captured the generational clash between the Munsters and the Standells. Herman and Lily, despite being literal monsters, represented the old-school, wholesome values of classic television parents. The Standells, on the other hand, embodied the new wave of young, people who were embracing rock music, long hair, and a more free-spirited lifestyle. Watching these two worlds collide made for hilarious television, but it also reflected the real-life tension between parents and teenagers in the 1960s. What's even more interesting is how this episode foreshadowed the struggles that would eventually lead to the Munsters' cancellation. By 1966, shows like Batman and the Monkees, which fully embraced bright colors, fast pacing, and pop music, were taking over television. Audiences were shifting away from classic black-and-white sitcoms like The Munsters, favoring shows that felt more in tune with the rapidly changing culture. Looking back, Far Out Munsters wasn't just a fun episode, it was a sign of the times. It highlighted how The Munsters was trying to connect with a younger audience, even as television itself was evolving. Today, this episode stands out as a unique time capsule of the 1960s, blending classic monster comedy with the rock and roll revolution in a way that no one saw coming. Despite its success and devoted fanbase, the Munsters came to an unexpected end after just 2 seasons. With only 70 episodes, the show disappeared from primetime television far too soon. But why did a show that seemed so popular get canceled so abruptly? The answer lies in a mix of shifting audience preferences, stiff competition, and behind-the-scenes challenges that made it impossible for the Munsters to survive. The biggest factor? The rise of color television. When the Munsters debuted in 1964, black and white sitcoms were still common. However, by 1966, networks were rapidly switching to full-color programming. The problem was that the Munsters relied heavily on its eerie, classic horror movie aesthetic, which looked best in black and white. Transitioning to color would have been a major challenge. Herman Munster's famous green skin, for example, didn't actually look quite right in color tests. Meanwhile, other shows were using color to their advantage, making the Munsters feel outdated overnight. But the real nail in the coffin? ABC's Batman. The 1966 premiere of Batman, starring Adam West, was a game-changer. It was loud, colorful, fast-paced, and filled with action, everything that younger audiences craved. Overnight, Batman became a cultural phenomenon, and it aired in the same time slot as the Munsters. Unable to compete with the Caped Crusaders' high-energy adventures, the Munsters saw a sharp decline in ratings. Behind the scenes, the cast was also struggling. Fred Gwynne, Herman, and Al Lewis, Grandpa, were exhausted from wearing their heavy monster makeup and costumes for long hours every day. Filming under hot studio lights made it even worse, and both actors were ready to move on by the time the show was canceled. Ultimately, The Munsters was a victim of timing. Had it premiered a few years earlier or adapted to the color TV boom more quickly, it might have lasted longer. But in the fast-changing world of 1960s television, it simply couldn't keep up. Even though its original run was short-lived, the Munsters never truly disappeared. Thanks to reruns, reboots, and a devoted fan base, the show has remained a beloved part of pop culture for decades. Though the Munsters only lasted for 2 seasons, its impact on television history has been undeniable. Unlike many shows that fade into obscurity after cancellation, the Munsters has continued to thrive through reruns, reboots, and a dedicated fan following that has kept its legacy alive for nearly 60 years. One of the biggest reasons for its enduring popularity is its timeless humor and relatable family dynamics. Despite being literal monsters, the Munster family was no different from any other wholesome TV family of the era. Herman was a lovable, goofy father figure, Lily was the wise and caring mother, and Grandpa was the eccentric but endearing grandparent, characters that viewers of all generations could relate to. The show's charm wasn't just in its monster gimmick, but in the fact that it told heartwarming family stories with a spooky twist. Over the years, The Munsters has spawned multiple spin-offs and reboots, each attempting to recapture the magic of the original. Some of the most notable attempts include Munster, Go Home, 1966, the first full-color Munsters movie, and The Munsters' Revenge, 1981, a made-for-TV reunion special. The 1990s saw The Munsters Today, a reboot that introduced the characters to a new generation. More recently, filmmaker Rob Zombie released The Munsters, 2022, a reimagining of the original show with a modern touch. Beyond reboots, The Munsters has left its mark on pop culture in ways that fans might not even realize. The show's themes of acceptance and being proud of who you are have made it an unexpected symbol of individuality and inclusion. The viral clip of Herman Munster's speech about not judging people by their appearance has become widely shared as a message of anti-discrimination and equality. Additionally, the Munsters paved the way for future sitcoms that blended comedy with the supernatural, influencing shows like The Addams Family, Bewitched, and even later hits like The Simpsons and The Big Bang Theory, which also featured quirky outsiders navigating the normal world. Despite its cancellation, The Munsters proved that a great show doesn't need a long run to make an impact. It remains a nostalgic favorite, a cult classic, and a testament to the power of family, even if that family happens to live at 1313 Mockingbird Lane. If you enjoyed this deep dive into The Munsters, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more classic TV secrets.